Right, Lee, you head off soon to finalise your preparations for London. What exactly are the plans for the coming weeks?
First of all, I'm going to be, I'm here for a few more weeks, and then I'm training camp in Font-Romeu for just over 4 weeks, and then back, actually just before the training camp at Font-Romeu, I'll be going up to Loughborough to be kitting out, which will be me getting measured up for my Olympic attire, and then out to the training camp, back into Loughborough for the holding camp. And I'll be there for the initial part of the games, and then heading down from Loughborough to the village. Needs to be confirmed exactly when, but a few days before my race, as I understand it at the moment. And then a few days in the village before the marathon on the 12th of August.
What will they actually be testing at Loughborough? You've been there several times, but...
Oh, I mean, in terms of the kitting out, just measuring up for...
No, sorry, in terms of testing, will there be any testing involved with that?
I'm not sure if I'll do any testing as such close to the Olympics. Haven't kind of finalised that side of things yet. In the past, Loughborough is where I've gone to like physiology testing in the lab, testing my thresholds and sort of like field testing for specific things within my relevant to my event. Particularly with the marathon, in terms of like the physiology side of things, one of the things we test a bit more, and particularly in relation to me coming back from altitude training, is my ability to use fat as a fuel source, believe it or not. That's quite a really important thing for the marathon. The more you can rely on that as your main source of energy in the race, the less likely you are to, for want of a better phrase, I guess, hit the wall at certain paces and things. So it's an important aspect for marathon running.
Good. So this means saying goodbye to Teresa and the children again for an extended period. Never easy, I guess.
Yeah, no, it gets hard every time because the kids are obviously getting older and then more aware of going away, especially Thomas now. He's going to be 4. In fact, both the kids' birthday will be the week before my race, which I won't be there for exactly on their the actual birth date. But we'll do.
Is that for Thomas or?
For both. Jessica's born at the beginning of August, and as is Thomas. So Thomas's birthday is actually 2 days before my race. So the plan is to have a celebration when we get back, sort of a week after. But this time will be probably one of my longest stints away from home actually this time.
This one?
I'm going to be close to sort of 7 weeks away from home, and 3 or 4 weeks is hard enough. So this time around will be even tougher. But at least this time around it's kind of for the biggest prize as far as my sporting career goes.
Well, will you be catching up with them at all before the Olympics?
I talked initially about maybe them coming out of Font-Romeu, but it's not really workable, and maybe more of a stress than it would be for her as much as anything. Teresa, that is. So it's unlikely that we'll probably catch up during that time, or we'll speak or Skype and that kind of thing. But in terms of actually getting together, probably after the race now.
Yeah, right. Your first Olympics, obviously, and perhaps the only one. So do you envisage taking part in the opening ceremony? Because a lot of athletes tend to give it a miss.
Yeah, I actually hadn't thought about it too much. I just assumed that I wouldn't be. Obviously, I'd love to be part of something like that, but realistically, I'm actually travelling back on the day of this opening ceremony. I think to check my travel dates, but it's something obviously you'd like to be part of, but you have to, from my point of view, always try to be professional in terms of making sure I have the best preparation for me and the competition itself. So that's not really that conducive because I'm in the holding camp up in Loughborough, and obviously the games are in London, so it would mean more travel, and I'll already be travelling back from the altitude training camp. So I've resigned to myself the fact that I was going to miss it, and it'll be the closing ceremony, will be my main taste of the sort of before and after parties, if you like.
Does it disappoint you that you're missing it at all, or is there a bit of you
I mean, I've actually, no, so now you kind of mentioned it now, I haven't really thought of it's not really now, until now, should I say, that I've thought about it. And it doesn't. I mean, you know,
because you presumably you've been at Commonwealth Games.
Yeah, I mean,
opening ceremonies where I guess for Guernsey it's compulsory, isn't it? Or was it compulsory?
I forget now whether, yeah, I think it's compulsory unless if you're competing the next day. So I know, maybe I'm thinking of Ireland Games, I've certainly missed opening ceremonies for Ireland Games before because I've been competing the next day. But I've been to a few, I think I've been to all the Commonwealth Games. I mean, certainly I remember going to Melbourne in the MCG, and that was a fantastic kind of experience. And okay, it's not an Olympics, but I've had a sort of taster of those kind of things. So I think if I'd never been to anything like that before, perhaps I feel like I was missing out. And okay, I've not been to an Olympic one, but you know, my prize, my big thing is competing in the Olympics and trying to compete well, because I'll have good memories in the Olympics. I think only if I compete well. It's one of those things where you want to have good memories of it, and it's more important to me to run well than it would be to go to the opening ceremony. So.
What will your schedule be on the day of the race, and in terms of what you eat and drink, etc.? Will it be any different than normal?
No, it's good to have a routine that you're familiar with, really. I mean, the difference is the race starts slightly later than I've run in a marathon before. It starts at 11 AM, so when I've done a London Marathon, for example, it's other championship marathons, it's usually started by, the latest thing I've started is 10 o'clock in the morning. And when I raced in debut, it was even earlier than that, so it's about 8 or 9 o'clock. I think maybe in debut it might have been earlier than that. I actually forget now, but I certainly remember being up very early. So yeah, you stick to a routine and generally foods that you're kind of familiar with and that sort of thing. But I'm very much a creature of habit, I guess, with those types of things. And
what would you eat for breakfast?
Usually something like porridge. That's pretty much what I eat most days before, on a daily basis, whatever the weather. So some fruit. Taking on plenty of fluids. I was taking, depending on sometimes on a race in hot conditions, I'll have like a high salt drink, which I use in a certain period before the race. So whether I use that in London will depend on the weather in London at the time. So that can be more varied than it would be for somewhere like last year when I was the World Champs in debut. That was hot and humid. It was a given. The conditions would be tough, so I took the salt drink as a given, really.
Do you prepare the drinks yourself?
The salt drinks, yeah, normally. Sometimes a physiologist might help us with that. Like they carry some of the stuff with us, so we don't have to worry about it. But yeah, make it up normally the night before. Especially something like the salt drink, it's got to be better served chilled, so you can just put it in your fridge in your room the night before, and then you have like a plan or itinerary of when you're going to take stuff the next day, almost kind of on a minute by minute kind of thing. What time you get up, to what time you have breakfast, to what time you got to be at a bus or to travel somewhere and so forth. So. What
time will you be getting up on the day of the race?
Yeah, I don't know actually. Normally if I was racing at, like for the London Marathon for example, which starts at 9:45, I was getting up about between 5:30 and 6. But something like London where it's starting an hour later, I've got the luxury of being able to get up between sort of 6:30 and 7. So I suspect somewhere around that, just bring everything forward an hour.
I was reading the other day, again, the story of the Italian Dorendo Pietri. You may want to come across it. At the London Olympics in 1908, he was leading coming into White City Stadium, and then basically his body shut down on him, and he was in a state of collapse and swaying everywhere. And in the end, he was so bad they actually to carry him over the finish line and was disqualified. Of course, in those days, one of the things they were drunk during the course of the race was a bit of champagne. And before he was eating steak and coffee. What's in your drinks to keep you going
during the race?
During the race.
During the race, I use like a sort of basically a carbohydrate-based drink. In particular, things that contain a kind of combination of right now, I forget now, it's like fructose and other sugars. I forget now, sorry. But it's kind of, essentially, I'll use that in combination with gels, but there's basically 8 drink stations. You have one every 5k in the race, so we put our drinks out. I know some people tend to have weaker concentrations at the start and stronger concentrations towards the end. But I generally use a fairly constant concentration throughout, and I'll take something on every station. I know some people avoid it early on, they think they don't need it until later in the race, but I'm a firm believer in kind of a little and often approach with a lot of things, and particularly with the drinks. So I'm trying to take on somewhere around sort of like 100 mils, with it, depending on conditions. I might drink a bit more, a bit less if it's depending on the kind of conditions on the day. If it's hotter, it's humid, and if you're going to sweat more.
Yeah.
So I'll take that amount on every 5k. I'll also use, apart from maybe 2 stations where I'll use a gel which contains a bit of caffeine and a higher concentration of carbohydrate. And I'll use them normally like one about sort of 15k and one about 30k. Those are sort of key points in the race for me. There's not really too much else that I'll do within that. Although, funnily enough, my first ever marathon there, I was sort of a little bit less sort of wise to kind of what drinks work best. I actually used Coke on my first one. I didn't use it at every station. I used a proper sports drink, but then rather than using a sort of caffeine-made gel, I used flat Coke at 30k. One because it had caffeine and sugars, although not the best combination, granted. But when you get to that stage, it doesn't have to taste nice. So, it's more just for the sugar and the caffeine picking up into the last sort of 10 to 12k of the race. A bit more scientific than that.
Staying with the Pietri theme, in your relatively short marathon career, has there been a time in a race, in a marathon, when you felt a wall of sorts approaching you?
I've been quite fortunate in that I've never got to that sort of stage where I've literally come to almost to a standstill or crawled in across the line. But I've had experiences where I've thought I'm getting close to my limitations, or I've slowed down, just purely because, not for want of effort, trying to go faster, I couldn't. Certainly Barcelona, my second marathon, European Championships, which is 1st of August 2010. It was 30 degrees plus and about 70 or 80% humidity around the streets of Barcelona. It was a lot more humid than people would have expected, and very hot. A lot of people suffered. There were a number of people at the end of the race getting medical attention on drips. One of the British guys was as white as a sheet and dropped out after only halfway. And our team manager was Gary Locke, Paula's husband, and he was the team manager at the time. He said he had to leave the room at the time. He didn't look in a good way. Unfortunately, it was all right, but it didn't affect me quite as badly. Fortunately, it doesn't put in a good performance, but certainly I think the thing I find is that when it's hot and I suddenly dehydrate more, the cramping kicks in. In fact, in that race in Barcelona, I was doing well. I was in about 7th place at the time. I finished 8th. I was in 7th at the time, moving through the field still. 2k to go. I'd been feeling the effects of cramp kicking in, but not quite, for about 5k. I went past a sort of British contingent on the sidelines. They were sort of shouting my name, and they were really close, and they were kind of giving me encouragement. And I literally cramp kicked in right at that moment as I put in front of them. And about 20 or 30 people were shouting. It was like a big sigh, like disappointment kind of thing. As I was standing stretch for about 10 seconds. I lost a place in the race. Fortunately, got back going again. But I had to be really careful that last 2k not to push too hard, because it was literally there. It was ready to kick in again, but I held it together, and it was okay. But I was on the crest really of that, going from great run to disaster. So I go those sort of things. Sort of sometimes it can be a factor in how you approach the races.
Do you actually think about these sort of things during the latter stages of races? You're thinking, well, perhaps I should push on a little bit more, but I need to sort of make sure I finish.
Yeah, sometimes it's kind of one of the things I've worked with, like with a sort of sports psychologist a little bit, because what you don't want to do is let the what ifs kind of affect how you're going to perform in the latter stages. So you're kind of okay, you need to know your body, but at the same time, you also, in order to, there's probably many great quotes out there. I probably won't be able to recall right now, but to be successful, you need to take risks, and to get the best out of yourself, you can't play it safe. I think I was maybe not accused, but I think one reporter a while back suggested to me after debut that perhaps maybe it was now time to stop playing it safe and take some risks in the race, and kind of that got my back up a little bit, because I felt that actually I performed really well in my race. I was a little bit unlucky not to make the top 20, and David came 22nd, but I don't think they knew too much about marathon running there.
In training terms, how draining is marathon training compared to, say, life as a 5 or 10k runner? How much sleep do you require and rest? Yeah,
it's not too much different in terms of the actual rest and sleep sort of things, because maybe as a 5 or 10k runner you're running maybe slightly less, and your sessions aren't quite as long and specific to the marathon, but there's still a lot of work being done. You hear things of Mo Farah running 130 miles a week, and which is what I top out at for the marathon training, and he's a 5-10k guy. Sometimes I think it depends on the athlete, but certainly the work that I've done, there are 1 or 2 sessions in particular that are really quite taxing on the body, and you have to be careful that you take the extra rest after, otherwise it's the sort of thing that can really derail your preparation, because if you don't respect the sessions, then the next few days you push too hard, then that's where you can get injuries, little niggles that turn into something more serious, or you get run down and ill. So there are little things I'm doing. Certainly now, which is more of a general thing for me, I'll have, when I'm in the heavy part of training, I'll take daytime naps. People probably laugh at that. I think I've got it easy. I've been able to take an afternoon snooze, but when you're on, especially when you're at altitude, and in Kenya in particular, I'm up to sleep 2 more hours a day than I would do when I'm at home, partly because I'm actually able to, because I'm really waking up my children at 6 or 7 in the morning, but also because the body has to work harder when you're at altitude. So you throw in 120-mile weeks, you throw in going up to altitude at 8,000 feet, it's all stuff that takes it out of your body, and you need to give that time. If you don't respect that, you don't recover, and you don't actually train as well. So,
in Guernsey sporting terms, you've become a modern legend, up there with the all-time greats, the Andy Prios of this world. Was there a point in your life when you thought, I can really make a name for myself in athletics and make a career out of it? It's so weird.
Yeah, I've never really thought about it like that. There have certainly been times where I've almost got to the stage where I thought, maybe it's as good as it's going to get. But there's been like little markers, little things that when you look back on a little bit, you think, well, actually, okay, I made the right decision there to move up, say, the marathon, because I had some success over 1500. I made some long-standing records sort of locally and things, but never really kind of made a name for myself at an international level, and certainly didn't have any vests, British vests at that stage. 5 and 10k had a couple of years really where actually my athletics were almost kind of to a point, kind of a crossroads where it was like, do I persevere here? I haven't had much success. I think I had a couple of seasons where it's gone very up and down really, and then that sort of marathon opportunity came along for me, and you didn't know how it was going to pan out at the time, but it was that was a big, I think, after the marathon, as soon as I moved up to the marathon and ran well at it, particularly my first with my first GB vest in a summer event. I ran for Britain on the cross-country events, but I still didn't truly believe, should say, that maybe that there was a place for me in summer championships, an event, and the marathon gave me that opportunity. And yeah, And since then I've had 3 years where I've been to Europeans and a Worlds and now an Olympics, so it's been a nice progression and been a great step forward for me coming in terms of my running. So.
Here we are sitting in fantastic facilities down here at Foots Lane in the new High Performance Centre. How good or indifferent is Guernsey as a training base for an endurance runner of your standard? It's
got pretty much everything I need, perhaps other than one would be all quite important, the altitude factor, but I don't need to spend my whole year at altitude. I've got the opportunity to go on camps, so I think that mix of the camps that have been available to me in the past and being somewhere like Guernsey actually has been a great combination for me. I don't necessarily have that many training partners here, but to be honest, as a marathon runner, even when you go on training camps, there's not many people that are of that standard anyhow, so if they're at that standard, they're probably doing another event, so the training is different anyhow. So I actually think there's no better place than Guernsey for a training base, unless of course you want altitude. So the facilities, like you pointed out, are second to none. The new High Performance Centre has got everything you need in terms of the strength and conditioning environment. I've got great places to run. I love running on the west coast around Landcrest. It's one of my favourite places to run, and all the places I've been able to train. It's nice to get away and do training camps, and you can just add a little bit more focus, and the change of scenery is always good. But I love coming back as well. So coming back and knowing that it's very much I don't know, it's a strange thing. It's like that sort of small village community type thing. I joked with someone the other day. I would go out for a run, and it felt a bit like Rocky. We go for a run, and there's someone saying, "Well done, Lee. It's great to see you doing well," and that sort of thing. And going out for a run, you might be having a bit of might be struggling that day, and then someone just pops out in the corner and says, "Well done," as you run past, and you suddenly feel like you're kind of running on air again. So that is kind of a quite unique environment, I think. And like I said, it's just there's great places to run here. Okay, it's not very big, but to be honest, most people who are in the training at home anyway will run from outside their front door, and I can run outside my front door and go straight onto the west coast more or less. So I'm more than happy with that. So.
You don't get tired of the same old roads.
No, I can vary my routes a bit, but I think distance runners are quite much creatures of habit anyway, so I think they quite like to have their kind of familiar routes and things. As long as you're not doing the same run every day, day in, day out, and the same training, I think that's when you get the kind of the boredom and the staleness can kick in. But my training's varied, my routes are varied, it's just, like I said, I think I'm more fortunate than a lot of runners in the UK. You've got to run in big cities and worry about things like pollution and cut traffic and maybe not feeling safe on some of their runs. But Guernsey has all of that in the opposite sense, in the good sense, and